Okay, I think it's time to start. Hello and welcome everyone to today's Safe Places lunch webinar titled Explosions in Stockholm, Location and Environmental Features. And this is the first in a webinar series. And I'm your host, Jonathan Abraham.
Recording in progress.
And I'm part of the Safe Places network here at KTH. And for those who are new here, the Safe Places is interdisciplinary network bringing both research, education, and practice together on the topics of safety, security, and place and environment. And today's session is very much in that spirit. It tries to address an urgent issue that has drawn quite a lot of media and research attention, namely the explosions and bombings in Sweden in the past few years. And in particular, we will learn a bit more about where these incidents occur and their environmental, spatial, and temporal patterns. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers here today, Professor Vania Ceccato and Alvar Almgren, who have applied together. They have applied a wide range of methods and data sources to identify physical and social factors surrounding the occurrence of explosions in the Stockholm region. And this will be a very interesting and thought-provoking session, so I urge everybody in the audience to use the chat to ask questions that you have for our speakers during the talk. But now, please join me in welcoming Professor Vania Ceccato and Alvar Almgren.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. You please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, my name is Alvar Almgren, and I work as a research engineer here at KTH. And I've been working on this project. I mostly done GIS maps and statistical analysis.
Hi again. My name is Vania Ceccato. I am a professor here at the KTH and have been working for a while on the geography of crime and fear of crime in relation to the structure of the city. We have been doing this for more than 3 decades, and we are quite happy to cooperate with colleagues here in Sweden in everything we do. But also with colleagues abroad. We have done cooperations with colleagues in the UK, in the US, but also with colleagues in the Global South. And this study is no different. We have been working with Dr. Ned Levine and Yu Hao Kang, which are colleagues from the US. So basically, that's it. We have been very happy.
That's great. So to start off this talk, maybe can you just tell us what made you decide to look at the environments of these explosions in Stockholm now?
Yes, we have got a number of people asking about the different characteristics of these explosions, and many people were insinuating that they have something to do with also shootings. Although shootings we have been working in the past, we knew very little about the environments in which explosion happened. So from previous research here in Sweden, we and also elsewhere, we knew that the explosions here in the case of Stockholm, they were not related necessarily, they were not related to terrorism acts. Normally, they were associated with, for instance, gang or organized crime. So obviously, we had a number of questions that we wanted to answer. One was to try to unpack the relationship between explosions and also the shootings, because we knew that there were this relation between these two geographies at a neighborhood level, but we knew very little about these microenvironments. To get funding for these kinds of research is kind of difficult. Funding is limited, but but we were very happy to get a small funding from the research, the Försäkrings Research Foundation, who kindly actually supported this pilot study, which allowed this pilot study and also the cooperations with our colleagues. The Vania Foundation also made possible the visit of Dr. Yu-Hao Kang. And with this pilot study, we have a possibility now to analyze or to know more about these microenvironments where explosions happen.
Mm-hmm. So, how has the media and public discourse been about the violence and explosions in Stockholm?
Yes, as you well know, both shootings and explosions have been part of the media representation of violence in Stockholm. And this is a little bit problematic because when we talk a lot about these events, it seems that there are many, but actually both shootings and explosions, they are relatively rare events. So basically we don't want to contribute to this kind of a moral panic in which, we the risk of being victimized by, shootings or explosions amplify the fear, and overall anxieties. We needed to put, this issue into perspective. Just to give an idea, we have on average per year around 41 explosions in the Stockholm County, and the average per year in the Stockholm municipality is around 13, which is, we are talking here about small numbers compared to many other types of crimes that are, in thousands per year. It's important to talk about that because, of course, this defined, a very different picture because we read this on everyday basis on the, in the newspaper. So in this presentation, we step back a little bit and try to understand a little bit more about these explosions. We know that they are relatively few events, but it's kind of important also that these events, they have a very big impact on the communities. So for those that are involved, it's a big tragedy. And you see a little bit when we show the results, the kinds of impacts that these kinds of incidents have in people's lives. So we are not here to diminish, decrease the impact because, of course, it's something horrible. So, but we also wanted to highlight that, we are talking here about small numbers. So the aim of this study has been to investigate where and when explosions are reported, how they relate to the social and physical environment of an area, and the impact they have on the area and the population's safety and well-being, and also understand a little bit more on the preparedness of the, the emergency services in those locations when things happen, but also think a little bit afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But for our audience clarity, and so we are all on the same page, what is actually an explosion in the context of your study?
Yes, so we have looked at intentional explosions, which include bombings or hand grenade detonations performed by criminal individuals. And these, according to the Swedish law, endanger the public. They create danger to life and can also cause extensive property destructions. They are often used as a way for criminals to send a message like threaten or intimidate, but according to police it is often for extortion purposes, for money.
Mm-hmm. And Vania, could you tell us a bit about your quite impressive array of data sources and methods? And yeah, can you just tell us more about that?
Yeah, we obtained our data from the police records, and it was 166 incidents in Stockholm County from January 2021 to January 2025. And with that, you can actually make maps and have some information about when these incidents happen. But that kind of data is pretty limited. So we needed to be creative. So one of the things that we did to understand a little bit about the environments in which these events happen is basically we use Google Street View images to map out and understand, the land use of those areas, whether those explosions are close to bars, restaurants, close to people's houses, if it was single-family houses, if it was multi-family houses, bars, restaurants, and so on. Alvar also visited a number of places and also tried to double check the things that we see in Google Street View. In reality, he took photographs of many of these places and also talked to people that were passing by. So the field work was actually very important. We put some of this data on geographic information systems, and we did spatial analysis, regression. We implemented different kinds of regression models to try to understand the relationship between the characteristics of these environments and the locations of the explosions. We also had Yu Hao Kang working with computer vision in Google Street View images and looking at the components of these locations. So an image where an explosion happened, how is the proportion of roads or houses and streets and so on, compared to the environments nearby, or compared to places of shootings, for instance. And of course, we topped that up with the analysis of news articles coming from media coverage during the same period.
All right, thank you. So, based on all of these methods and so on, when do these explosions most often happen?
Yes, as you can see, we've made 3 clocks dividing the number of explosions by hour, day of the week, and month of the year. So looking at the hours, you can clearly see that it is most common that they are done at nighttime, between 12 and 5 o'clock in the morning, when it's dark and easier to detonate when no one sees. So when it comes to days and months, we don't see as clear patterns or significant exceptions. But we can still see at the months that there is a bit more in the darker winter months of December and January.
And who are the more potential suspects most often that you've noticed?
Yes, so in the police data that we used, there was no information about suspects. So instead we looked at news articles. So we checked 190 articles in total. And in these, there were only 34 mentions of potential suspects. But these mentions, it was most common with young males being the suspects, especially teenagers. 14 were mentioned as potential suspects. There was only 1 woman mentioned. As well, there were 6 masked individuals that were suspect.
Okay, so you got the when and the who, but where does the most explosions happen then?
Yes, Alvar did prepared this nice little map here with you can see here above my head, and the little red dots where are the locations of the explosions, and we have also in the background the the Stockholm County with all the municipalities in it, and in the middle we have the Stockholm municipality. As it could be expected, a lot of these, or 38% to be precisely, of these explosions happen in Stockholm. And there are other municipalities in which some of these incidents happen, like Södertälje, Botkyrka, and so on. In Stockholm, you have, areas, for instance, in western part of the city, but also in the south, getting a number of, let's say, some hotspots appearing there. But what is more interesting is when we actually divided the number of explosions by the number of residents, we see that some of these municipalities, smaller municipalities, like Upplands-Bro, for instance, have a higher concentration per inhabitants than Stockholm does. So, which suggests intense localized conflicts where a limited number of actors generated repeated incidents. We also see that using, for instance, regression models, we were able also to associate these explosions to the conditions in different neighborhoods. So we're using what is called the Poisson car model to analyze the geography of the explosions over the whole county and over the Stockholm city. We controlled for a number of aspects like land use, but also socioeconomic factors that we were interested to try to test and see if they would be significant. What we learned from that, and it's pretty also similar to the shootings, is that the variables that came up as significant is nighttime, so whether the explosions are happening during the night, but in terms of the spatial distribution, the commonality is basically that all the neighborhoods tend to have a large share of low-income earners. For the whole county, we also see that the locations of sports center also come out as significant, which also has indicated a little bit of the locations of these incidents, most likely not in the center of the neighborhoods, but more in the outskirts of these neighborhoods, closer to, most likely closer to schools and school grounds.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, Alvar, maybe you can tell us a bit more about what are the targets of these explosions?
Yeah, I think in this case, we also needed to, before we talked about the targets, I needed to step in and talk a little bit of the kinds of microenvironments, because of course what I said now has characterized a very big, give a very general picture of the kinds of neighborhoods. What I need also to say is that we run a factor analysis which indicates 3 types of areas, okay? Microenvironments. So explosion tended to be in 3 types of areas. One that were more or less secluded places, like courtyards. So variables that came up as significant were playgrounds. It was areas where there were like some sort of a public sittings, but the courtyards in particular, like the pictures that you see here, exemplifies. Another area is the inner city. city. Okay, so what characterizes these areas is a very high flow of, for instance, car traffic. Most likely people don't have much of a time to stop and see what is happening. And so the pedestrian flows, are present, but perhaps people are not ready to intervene. We don't know. So our place is also of bars and restaurants. So we are talking about inner city areas. And a third type is basically, I would say, areas that have a weak social control. So the variables that kick in were industrial areas, poor maintenance places, but also parking lots, right?
Yeah.
So these are the three types of areas.
Okay. And like I will just remind the audience also like that you can write the questions in the chat and then we'll read them up later for the speakers as well. But yeah, now, so Alvar, can you tell us about the more specific targets, I guess, for these explosions?
Yes, so the targets are typically linked to criminal organizations. It is the most common target is residential buildings. As you can see here, the image multi-family house is the most common overall. So other targets are cars and commercial buildings like restaurants or stores, but these are not as common, as you can see, about 7%. So other less common included industrial buildings and some office buildings as well.
All right, so now that you identified the locations, how did you actually analyze them and what were the methods for that?
Yes, as you can see in these pictures, right, you have areas that have vegetation, areas that have buildings, cars, bicycles. And so we use Google Street View images as the ones that you can see in the background, although these are photographs that Alvar took it in the field work. But they look like these facades. And what we did is that we use actually this Google Street View to try to count the proportions of these elements in the landscape and try to test the hypothesis of non-randomness because of course we knew that most of these locations they are places that people are target particular individuals. So we were expecting a non-randomness pattern. So what we did is we compare the components of the street images with random places around 50 meters around these explosions, which didn't have explosions. And we also compared the locations of the explosions or the characteristics of the explosion, the environments of where the explosions happen, with the characteristics of places where shootings occur to see if there were similarities. Okay, so this was done, for the Stockholm municipality because we had data for both shootings and explosions. What we found out is basically we confirm that the non-randomness hypothesis that these places are similar to the places in the surrounding areas. And more importantly, what we actually could also confirm from at the micro level was that the elements of the microenvironments of the explosions are quite identical across the places where shootings occur. So that as you see in this picture, above on my head here, you see the components of the images buildings, the quantity of roads and trees. And despite there are small little differences between explosions and shootings, for instance, much more buildings in explosion locations than in shootings location, still the correlation is striking. So obviously we are talking about that explosions are part of a broader ecology of violence rather than isolated incidents.
Very interesting results. And I'm thinking explosions are very much extraordinary events as well. I'm guessing they have quite an impact on people. So what are the impacts on people and places of these explosions?
Do you want to answer, or I can answer?
I think you can answer.
Yeah, okay. The explosions are actually, have an impact, as you can well imagine, on the properties. And we have seen these in numerous images from the media coverage. But one of the things that we also did is an analysis of what is written in the news articles. And one of the things that we see is also an impact on people, which is kind of striking. As I can read some of the quotes that we just collected from the news, and as the following: when it happened, the explosion happened, we considered moving out, but it has become safer now. So as this example shows, it affects people, and this effect can be quite stay there for years and months. People are very scared about their families, their kids in particular, and they are normally very shocked when it happens because it's a big trauma. It's a very big sound, and this, of course, make people think about where they actually are living. And some of these quotes are quite clear. But in that quote, you can also see, now the area has become safer. So you definitely see there that people are seeing, the work of probably the police, but also other kinds of organizations that are working with them to try to mitigate these kinds of problems. And this is very positive. We can see this clear in the media coverage. But another thing that I want to highlight is that, one of the issues that we see with explosion that is also very similar to the with shootings is that these events or incidents, they have an impact in the house, in the property. Sometimes it can also injure people, and we have seen that people have already been killed in these situations. And the problem is also that this effect stay longer, and as it stay longer, it damages the reputation of these locations. We have read in the others documentation, other reports that there has been indications in the impact of the people's health in those areas, but also in the housing market. A friend of mine here at KTH has studied the impact of explosion and have seen a decrease of housing prices between 2 to 8% over a period of 6 months. So as what I want to highlight here is that there is an impact, and it's necessary to prevent these events because of the, I would say this explosion, they cause a diffuse victimization. So it's not only the building, the people there, but it spreads all over, I would say, the neighborhood, and also, the views that people outside of those areas have about this location, even leading to stigmatization, which is obviously not a good thing.
No. Very interesting. And I guess given this impact, what kind of support, like societal support, are provided to the targets following the explosions?
Yeah, when we looked at news articles, we found that the most common support seems to be handling the emergency by the police, securing the area, and also ambulance taking care of injured people if there are any. But there were also some example of when there was a risk of the house collapsing, that the police evacuated the inhabitants and found like a safe building for them to go. But overall, we felt that the focus was mostly on the short-term response to the incident, and that there could be more help in the long term from like social services or housing companies on talking to the individuals and emotional support for them.
Right. So thank you. It's been, you have, like we said, a long list of methods and data sources, and you have you have a lot of results as well. So, but what are the key takeaways that we can bring with us from this talk?
Yes, I mean, we have to remember that this is a small, a pilot study. We feel that we just, have a little bit of a taste of, we needed to know much more. But of course, we can take a number of takeaways from our results, and I will summarize basically as the following. One of the things that we probably can conclude and maybe confirm previous literature and also previous studies from Bro and other colleagues here in Sweden is that explosions are relatively rare incidents that often happen when it is dark. For obvious reason, the situational conditions promote that, and most of the people that have been seen on those situations when explosions happen are normally young people, so we cannot for sure know about these offenders because we don't have any information about the offenders more than from the media coverage. But of course, probably the police knows much more than we do. Our goal was actually to try to understand the locations. So, with that, we can say that explosions are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader ecology of a violence, as it could be expected. But what we can understand is, at least we ask ourselves, is what are the motives? And we know very little about the motivations. Of course, we can associate these incidents with criminal gang or activities, but there are also cases of extortions when the victims are perhaps people that are not necessarily linked to criminal organization. So probably we need to know more about that. What we can say from our study is that explosions locations closely match the characteristics of the shooting sites. And I mentioned to you the areas where this happen are multifamily housing in low-income areas. Normally, they tend to be secluded places like courtyards. We also mentioned areas with high accessibility, low guardianship, but also areas with weak social control. These are the areas that we were looking for, and that's what we got from our results. The question is, how can actually we think about these places and to think about the prevention of those places in relation to what can be prevented, whether it can be prevented, right? Another thing that we can take away from, think about, we can conclude from the media coverage, the news article, is that the emergency services are normally well prepared, especially the police, for immediate response to make sure that people are safe and, give comfort to those that are, exposed to these incidents. But we also see that there is a limited, long-term support. So, of course, there is quite a lot of things that we would wish, and probably this is coming up, in the news. Articles much more that we would like to see this long-term support. For the recommendations, I would say, of places that have these problems nowadays, or better saying, the recommendations for people in practice working with this, probably we are talking here to different peoples and different organizations, right? Because there are different, people working with this. There is the police, the people that work with crime prevention, and so on. So I think in areas with previous bombing, we probably needed to think and review, our routines, but also reinforce physical and perhaps electronic monitoring in, surveillance and so on. With the new, CCTV, laws, this would not be a big problem, I would say. For the future, I think we needed to strengthen the control and detection of explosives coming into the country, but also to know more how this, explosive move around up to the time when it falls in the wrong hands, and this happens. We know very little about also the types of explosives. At least we don't, right? Maybe the police knows or the technicians, but I understand that this is all part of the situational conditions. Why an explosive is chosen in relation to a particular type of a facade, because they need to know that, So these kinds of parts of the puzzle is still not there. We need also to intensify programs to prevent youth recruitment into criminal networks, because we see young people at the age of 15 years old are doing the job. So we need to understand how this can be better done. And also, as I mentioned before, we need also to think about how we can better, support victims, in particular those the residents, and enhance their long-term safety and well-being in general. I think that there are also issues about what we can study in the future. And basically, I think, as I mentioned before, we needed to know more about the kinds of physical conditions of these explosions. Certain physical conditions, what makes the explosion effective. We needed to know more about this, the components even of the explosion in relation to these microenvironments. How do explosive types, motives, and methods of explosives shape the risk and the impact of these incidents? Another thing that we need to know more is the supply of these explosives. How can border controls reduce access to explosives? And how can we avoid or limit the transportation of these explosives to not, fall in the wrong hands? And finally, can crime prevention measures be combined with long-term support to mitigate the impacts of these explosions in neighborhoods? And the question, how we can better do that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. That was a very interesting study, and quite some interesting insights also drawn from the study. I will turn to the audience now. See we have quite a few questions already in the chat, so we can start from there. So we have from Elpida, I think she says, your comparison of shootings and explosions is very interesting. I wonder if the locations are characterized also by ease of access of assaulters in and out without drawing attention. Do you have any info on this?
Yes. Do you answer that, or are we?
I can. So the most common is in courtyards with buildings. So it's generally easy to access, but it's quite a lot of surveillance. Many people live there, but as we said, most are performed during the night, so people are asleep. So then it is, people won't notice as much.
And I would say like this, there is quite a lot of places in shootings, from what I recall, that are a little bit, hidden places. In the case of explosions, they, if I would guess, they tended to be much more, visible, because they actually happens in front of people's houses. Sometimes in the backside. Sometimes we cannot tell because the XY coordinate is sometimes not precisely positioned, but still I would say that there are similarities between between these environments, and this is clear when we actually see that the microenvironments are actually quite identical between shootings and explosions.
All right. So I might not be going in order right now, but so this is a question from audience. Have you attempted to collaborate with police on information regarding these explosions? And if so, how has that influenced your work and research approaches?
This was a very short project, so I cooperated with the police because, of course, we received the data from the police, which we are very grateful for, which obviously provided us with the basis to start. But we know that there is quite a lot of intelligence in the police. Because it was a short project, we hope to have established, these kinds of cooperation and communication, with colleagues in the police in the future. We haven't done that so far.
Okay. So this Jasper Vanderkamp says, hi, very interesting. Here in the Netherlands, we have a lot of explosions, not only criminal in nature. In analyzing those explosions on a local within a city level, we see quite a strong spatial clustering, which seems mostly influenced by the clustering of targets and repeat explosions. Have you seen similar patterns?
We have seen that there were repeated victimization now between the 2021 and 2025, which is our data. Our colleagues in Malmö had looked between 2011 2016, and at that time they didn't really saw a very clear near repeat pattern, so which probably indicates that things are changing, because now we see a very clear near repeat pattern, but not in the past were not present as it was for shootings, which we think is quite interesting. But again, you have to remember, when we talk about clusters, we are talking about sometimes 2-3 points in one place, and sometimes they happen with some sort of, weeks and days, and also months, and sometimes years in between them. Maybe you can answer better this, Alvar.
But as you said, it was most common that either it was like in the same week that it was repeated, or it could be like up to multiple years later. So we actually didn't found like between a week and a month there was no repeat. So it was either like directly after or a long time after.
Interesting. Yes, so question from Josefa Stigler. Thank you for your presentation. I have two unrelated questions. Was there anything in your findings that surprised you? And two, in the Swedish context, is there evidence that surveillance, CCTV, prevents crime or facilitates its investigation? Also considering the fact that most explosions occurred at night. So I guess the first one is, was there anything that surprised you from your findings?
Anything surprise you?
Well, one thing that surprised me a little bit was that it was not that common that people get injured. Like in most cases, there are no injuries. Yeah, I thought that was it was nice to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think I was not prepared to read and also to see what people said on the field work about the impact. Then you understand. I would say that was a big surprise for me to actually understand how explosions can have such impact in people's lives. So it's not only these kinds of immediate effect. It is also about, people were saying, now I cannot go back and sleep anymore. But also that things like you mentioned when you went to the field, that even people that were not living the area, they heard about the explosion that happens, which means that there is some sort of memory, that qualitative memory in the area that stays after the explosion happened. And of course, this has a major effect. I mentioned before about the impact on housing prices, but also about, this, if people have a possibility to move out, they want to, and they are concerned about their kids and so on. So I think to answer your question, that was something that I was really surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, and the second question was again, is there evidence that surveillance or CCTV prevents crime or facilitates its investigation? I guess it's in the broader Swedish context, but maybe can somehow be linked to the explosions.
That could be a very good research question to explore in the future, because we cannot answer this question now. We didn't look at that. Of course, in areas where there is multiple bombings, probably a CCTV probably would help to see what when people actually plant these explosives, and maybe try to call the police before it explodes. If that would be possible, you never know how the explosive, if it is hang the grenade, it's immediately. But all this depends on the kinds of devices that we have there, and we know very little about that in this study. But it would be really interesting to see to what extent the CCTV would do any good to prevent that.
And yes, and then there's a question about if you make analogy, which methodology would you apply this to traffic accident data? I don't know if you can see any parallels between explosions and traffic accidents.
I think that we can think about people's routine activity, right?
Right.
Things happen where people are. Right? And most of the things, as I usually say to my students, you are my former student, I start classes saying like this, we go move around in the city, and we meet friends, we kiss each other, we hug, but sometimes we are mugged, we are robbed, and bad things happen, including explosions and shootings, but also traffic accidents. So I would say that probably there are a number of variables that are important for us to control sometimes to understand the dynamics of this process. And for instance, the flow of cars could be one that you could control to know how much accidents there are, per traffic of cars. The same you can do by the number of people that pass by in the area and the guardianship there, and to what extent some of these crime incidents happen. But of course, it depends on types of crimes and types of incidents. Car accidents in particular is related to what happens along the streets, not in the... But of course, there are parallels. And I think the commonality is the people routine activity, how, the city is moving around, either in cars or, when people are moving around.
Mm-hmm.
So there are definitely parallels that we can draw.
Mm-hmm. And and I guess a bit similar to the previous question, but it says January and February have seen a significant drop in shootings and explosions compared to previous years. And what do you think can be attributed to this decline? Is it stricter laws, or is it about more CCTV, as we mentioned before, or do you have any ideas, I guess?
I think probably those would be good hypotheses to start with. With the evidence of this small report, we can only guess. So maybe you could guess too, Alvar, that you also have been looking at the data, but probably would be good hypothesis to start. I would not dare that would be all of this, all the above. There are also quite a lot of, social crime prevention that are done to try to break the kinds of recruitment that we cannot deny, and it has a very important impact too. So it's not only fixing the situational part that will do the trick. So it's both the situational and the social crime prevention that has to work together to actually prevent. And I imagine that these two things are now, kicking in, and but right now we cannot, express any kinds of evidence on that matter. I'm sorry.
No, it's still interesting. And so I guess I have, a personal question also a little bit. Since you did this analysis of, completely. So you did this media newspaper analysis. Did you notice any, let's say, differences between municipalities, or in terms of coverage, or in terms of the social support that you recorded also during the study? Or I don't know if you, Alvar, did you see anything about the social impacts, for instance?
No, I wouldn't. I didn't notice any specific difference between different municipalities. I think it more depended on how big the explosion was, and how much damage it caused that affected the response.
Now let's see. But okay, I think we're moving towards the end of the talk, and I want to thank you again for your very interesting study, and I believe you have, like I said, the report. And like I mentioned, this is the first in a series of lunch webinars, and the next one is actually already next week on the March 5th on Thursday, where we'll be hearing about voices and views from Stockholm parks, a crowdsourced snapshot. So be sure to not miss that one. But until then, I would say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.